own the process as well. The Gambia's quest for a new constitution is not merely an exercise in legal drafting. It is a profound endeavor to build and reflect the hopes and dreams and aspirations of Gambians. We have heard how the 1997 Constitution is utterly undesirable, and it's been 8 years. We've been, since in this dispensation, that we've been wanting to do away with it and get a constitution that will be progressive, that will reflect the hopes, the dreams, and the needs of the Gambians. And that is the process that we have been embarked on. This consultation is absolutely necessary, for the Constitution is a reflection of our collective aspirations. It's a testament to our shared values and a blueprint for our future. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here, and allow me to introduce my eminent panelists for the first session of today. May I welcome Professor Abdoulaye Sen. May I welcome Mr. Said Matijau to join me, and Mr. Abdoulaye Fati Council to join me. Yes, just a minute. Check the name tag. Bring it closer. Bring it closer. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist, who would be the first to take the podium, Professor Abdoulaye Sen, and tell you a little bit more about him. I'm sure many of you know him. He is a native of Kaur. He attended Armitage High and Yundum College. He taught for several years at Kerawan Junior Secondary School and Crab Island. Mr. Sen was educated in the US and Canada. He is a professor emeritus, professor of political science at various US universities. He has written widely on political and constitutional issues on the Gambia, including a critical review of the then draft constitution, which we are trying to revive here. He is executive director of the Nyang Sane Institute for Social Research and Justice, which last week presented a position paper to a joint committee of the National Assembly, urging them to maintain the ban on FGM. He's also an activist, women's rights activist. Professor Sen, you're welcome. You may take the podium.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Media, can we do it here, or we have to go up? We can do it here. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, Nene, for that very kind. Thank you for that very kind introduction, Madam Chairwoman, fellow panelists, my friend and brother, the former president, Mr. Dabo, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is perhaps one of the most important exercises to be undertaken by a civil society organization, which aims primarily at nudging government and government institutions to ratify a constitution that hopefully would show the way not only in this generation, but for generations to come. So the importance of this event cannot be underestimated. And this organization in particular, Gambia Participates, must be commended, among others, for this wonderful occasion. The process of constitution building and making is a very messy process. There's the analogy that if you saw the way that sausage or sausages were made, you probably will never consume it because it is in itself a very dirty process. And constitution making has been made to appear, in fact, seem that way as well. I want to just very briefly, since we don't have much time, to reflect very briefly on the review that I wrote several years ago on the then draft Constitution. I saw it from a political, economic, and social perspective. And I was able to, in the process, take a position that the making of constitutions is vested with a lot of interests. And compromising or aligning them is often a very difficult, if not a treacherous process. But I also indicated that those who were the drafters were not exempt from this process. But more importantly, they had vital and very important interests that to some degree were reflected in the Constitution. Now, the judiciary was singled out for criticism for the awards as well as the perks that they injected into the Constitution. But what I was most concerned about was religion and the use of secular. And I have spoken widely about this, written widely about this as well. And it was very controversial. But I bit the bullet, basically, and suggested that it needed to be included, primarily because it would give the Christian population some semblance of belonging and security within the larger rubric of the African and, more importantly, Gambian situation. Certainly, there were other provisions that made it clear that Christians would still enjoy fundamental rights, even with the exclusion of the term secular. What I was most concerned about was citizenship. And here, I basically identified that there were several tiers of citizenship. Gambians born in the country that have never left were considered first-class citizens, based on my argument. And Gambians in the diaspora who still maintained Gambian citizenship were to some degree second-class citizens. And woe betide if you had a dual citizenship, you are basically a third or a fourth-class citizen. Why? Because most diasporans could not vote. They had not been enfranchised. And if you are a citizen of Gambia and a citizen of another country, you were excluded from voting and at the same time excluded from running for office or being elected into office. So basically, I termed it animal farm. All citizens are equal. But, all animals are equal. But some animals are more equal than others. to capture the irony, the paradox of it all. At the end of the day, I believe this is a very good effort, and I believe the National Assembly has a big responsibility. And among others, I wish to urge them to take this task with a lot of seriousness. But more importantly, I want to urge them to be bold, to be very bold, to some degree activist, and really eliminating all obstacles that various levels of citizenship encounter. I am also urging them to put a permanent ban on FGM, among other things. Representation of women in the National Assembly, to say the least, is abysmal. We need more representation in this body if it is to reflect the national character of this great nation. What I'm also suggesting, among other things, at the end of the day, is that they need to be more creative. I think on the fundamental rights of assembly, which really is curtailed to some degree in this country. But as far as political and civil rights are concerned, Gambia scores very highly. I believe on these rights, the previous or draft constitution came out very strongly to support that. And I'm saying this really is a very soft spot. This is a very soft issue. There's little controversy over it. And I believe they should go further by tackling those provisions and rights that are less contested. Economic rights for citizens, rights to development, and a host of other issues ought to be made stronger and bolder. In a nutshell, this is a great opportunity to make the Gambian Constitution one of the best in the continent, if not the world. The reason why we talk about the South African Constitution, among others, is because of their bold and to some degree activist position with regard to civil, political, economic, and group rights. After all, we have the Banjul Declaration that in itself should be the basis for a greater, more inclusive, more equal, and a more democratic Gambia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that very short and very apt contribution to the topic at hand, which is meant to explore the parallel approaches and obstacles to overcoming and to usher in a new constitution. It's very important, as you highlighted, to retrace our steps, I believe, see where it all went wrong, how it went wrong, so that, as one of the speakers said, we will not miss this last opportunity to get the best constitution we can and should for the Gambia. Highlighting the areas of contention, I think we need to remember them. We know most of them. Some perhaps are not of much concern now, but others are. Divisions still exist. So it behoves us, if we want the next one, this draft to succeed in this round, to examine those challenges and see how best they can be bring to understand our respective positions on these issues. So thank you for that. I want to call on the next speaker, but before I do that, may I introduce him? He's Mr. Seth Matijao, my brother. He's the co-founder of and executive director of the Center for Research and Policy Development in the Gambia. He's a political science lecturer at the University of the Gambia. His main research interests are in democratization and political transformations, Gambian politics and institutions, as well as migration and natural resource governance. Mouthful there. Since 2018, Mr. Seth Matijao, he is the barometer, the national investigator for the Gambia, a title that he very well does. Mr. Jao, the floor is yours.
Which one? Okay.
This big one in the middle.
Oh. So, one of my professors used to say that young generations that cannot use technology, they are dinosaurs. So almost at some point I was a dinosaur here. Thank you, Nene, my sister Nene, and also thank you to Gambia Participate and Mar and the entire team, but especially to my boss Fanta for inviting me here. But I also want to start by recognizing always, today people tell us like we are political scientists and all that stuff, but all we know about our country, we learn from people like Professor Sen seated here. And these were the generation that started documenting, but also writing about the trajectory of our country from an early age. And today, most of us are very happy that we are not only reading his work, but also sitting on the same platform with him. It's an honor, sir. But I also want to recognize Honorable Dabo. I think his commitment to constitutionalism, but to human rights, but generally to the well-being of the society, whether you agree with him or not, what recommendation. And I think this is something that I want to say, that, sir, you're highly welcome, and then we also acknowledge the work that you have been doing. So I just want to speak briefly, and also want to use this opportunity to recognize all the people that I've been working with over the years. So for me, in terms of the Constitution and in terms of what are the possible roadblocks, I always like to go back to history. And the first question that I keep asking is, why is that the Gambia today is very different from the Gambia of 1965, 1964, when a process of constitutionalism, a process of independence, a process of republicanism was instituted by older Gambians. But today, it's different. That Gambia, I think, there are older people here. They can tell me the number of people that were educated, that even had a bachelor's degree, talk less of master's degree. These are people that were not educated to the extent that younger Gambians of our generation today are educated. But why were they able to, one, navigate the question of independence, but secondly, navigate the question of constitutional development? Why were they, or how were they able to do that? And today we are not able to do that, it seems, for our generation. I'm not saying this just because I want to be a historian, but I also believe that we need to learn lessons that today what we are discussing is not the first time it is happening. In 1965, the public rejected the constitution that was brought before them. And eventually in 1970, we got a constitution. But what is happening in our current context is that it's not the people that rejected a constitution, but it was the National Assembly that rejected a constitution. So it is like the political elites are the ones that are disagreeing in terms of what the trajectory of this country is supposed to be. And at civil society level, and I think, during the previous conversation, we've been talking about that all we want as Gambians is a constitution, but the decision to bring about constitution must be the responsibility of the political leaders. Because political leaders, sometimes I feel sorry for them. Because I can be here as civil society talking, but political leaders are supposed to make decisions for 2 million Gambians. And all these 2 million Gambians do not agree on the same issue. The secular question was raised. And for me, my question is, how can a word, secular, that is supposed to eliminate both Christians and Muslims, is creating division among the Muslims and Christians? Because if it is about, neutralizing religion in the whole question, why are Muslims and Christians fighting over that particular word? It needs to, because we are not paying attention to our context. There is an issue of mistrust, there is an issue of disunity, and until we address this issue, the possibility of getting a new constitution might be problematic. But I also want to say that during the, when the discussions was happening at the National Assembly, I was there because somebody talked about Khalifa, I think in the morning he talked about how prepared the committee was. I was hired as a consultant by UNDP to prepare basically the timeline for the constitutional process and all those different stuff. And so the day that, the morning that the debate started, and I started listening to these different arguments, or is time limit, all these different points that you wouldn't expect, leadership, those in leadership position, because I always believe that politicians and political leaders, those in responsibility, they are from us, but also when it comes to responsibility, must think ahead of us, must see what we haven't seen, and must be able to, even no matter how difficult it is, to agree or to come through dialogue, through conversation, to come up with a position that is beneficial to all of us. I was 9 years old when this constitution was passed. Today I am what? I am old. I have my gray hair and all that stuff. And still we're discussing about this. But along the process, we've realized that this constitution was, lawyers will say it was doctored 52 times and all that. But right now, as we are discussing about the possibility of bringing it back, for me, I think the conversation that we need to have is what we are having right now. How genuine and how serious are we? Are we also learning lessons from the older generation that despite the disagreement, despite the limited education, despite the limited opportunities, they agreed and could bring a constitution that today shaped this country? What should be our responsibility? For me, that is the question, the introspection that we need to ask ourselves. But at the end of the day, we talk about legacy, we talk about all this, all of us say we want the constitution. But it must be a responsibility of a particular group, and for me, this particular group is the political group. That must sit, make the decision, make sure that they agree on some of these issues, because at the end of the day, what the people want is the movement from the dictatorship, the experience of a dictatorship to a new democratic Gambia, with a possible future for the older generation. So the question is us, and for me, for now, I think I'm turning into a broken record, because every opportunity I use, and sometimes people question so many things. Oh, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Let's look back at the legal frameworks. Let's look at the gaps that are created, and also we link that with our aspiration as a new country. Today, recently we host the OIC. We're talking about human rights everywhere. But how are we not focusing on those issues here? And for me, I think the starting point for all these transitions that we are doing must be our constitution. And I will also end by saying, and I will pick from my brother Eso, who always say that anything for the youth, not for the youth, is not for the youth. And so for me, for this constitution, there would be no new Gambia. And I've been saying this for many times. There will be no new Gambia if there is no new constitution. And I think whether we know it or not, the challenges that we continue to face, for me, 75% of those are part of the legal process. You talk about security sector reform. People were saying, oh, security is not going. I said, for me, if you give me security sector reform, somebody said 90 days, but for me, I will say 6 months. And the best way to do that is to reform the laws. The Police, 1959 Act. The Fire Service, 1929. Today, when they don't have water, when they don't have any, when they are not able to provide services, then we blame them. The Police, 1959. If you look at the act of arresting in terms of arrest, today we talk about Public Order Act, and everybody do not want that. But these are all laws. 1959, colonial. Do we still want to continue to be a colonial state based on these frameworks that we have to set up? And for me, the way to democratize is by overhauling all these different old institutions. And as Gambians, we design a framework, a feature that is beneficial for us, whether you are Christian, man, woman, young, old. We have a lot that we agree through collective discussion that we have, and that we need to think about the future that is yet to be born. So I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhao. You always rise to the occasion, don't you? Just like all the others here. Thank you for the reminder that we need introspection as well. Mm-hmm. We need to learn from the lessons that are there to be learned from. Why did we fail the first time? Mm-hmm. We can talk about anything, If we do not examine the reasons why, we will fail again, God forbid. And for us to succeed, I just want to add, it needs everybody, it's a collective effort. And it's like almost negotiation. We've been involved in mediation, the judiciary last week. It give and take. Let us focus on the prize, which is getting the best constitution that is the best, that can create the best representation for its people, carrying with it everything that we need as Gambians. One that will be envied by not only the sub-region but the world. There's so much good, as Professor Sen said, in this draft that to be squabbling around, around certain things is really not necessary. So thank you for that. And thank you for also mentioning the need for overhaul. There's so many other laws that need to be really reformed, because when we say new Gambia, it really must be new. And that is starting with the laws that we have, which had been the instrument for much of the oppression and other things that went wrong before. Thank you for that. Now, finally, and certainly not the least, my learned friend, Mr. Abdoulaye Fati. Mr. Fati is a private legal practitioner with over 10 years of experience. He's a human rights advocate and a transitional justice expert and consultant. He is the Secretary General of the Gambia Bar Association. Abdoulaye has served as the UNDP legal consultant at the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, the TRRC, and had been responsible for compiling the TRRC report. He provided legal analysis and contributed to the drafting of the TRRC's final report, which comprises the findings and the recommendations from the Commission, to establish a credible transitional justice process and mechanisms to promote reconciliation and sustainable peace following 22 years of dictatorship. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Mr. Fati to the podium.
Which one?
The middle one.
Thank you very much, Madam President, not of the Republic of the Gambia, but of the Gambia Bar Association, and to my co-panelists and guests here, particularly Mr. Dabo, for taking time to come here, and all the others, religious leaders, cultural, those from the civil society and the media. So we're grateful. And Gambia Participates, thank you for inviting me. But before, I also want to pay tribute to the Executive Director of Gambia Participates. I've been working with Gambia Participates and MAR for 4 years now, and his contribution to strengthening our democracy and good governance is really commendable. My brother Sal Tal as well, John Charles Njai, also made mention of his contributions. Sal's contribution. We were attending a meeting with some of our development partners 2-3 days ago with the president here, and in that meeting I mentioned how very deliberately he almost brought the bar from the position of a traditional trade union to the fore, for Gambia Bar Association to see itself as part of the CSO community and to be visible, really bridging the gap between relationship between law and society. So that's important. I think we are more and more visible and participating in some of these important discourses because of some of his contributions, and we have to acknowledge these things. But in relation to the subject matter of today's discussion, how we resurrect and bring back the draft constitution that failed prematurely in the National Assembly 4 years ago. So what do we do from now on? I think some of my ideas are that we have to adopt a bipartisan approach a holistic approach that is broad-based and flexible as well. If you apply for a job or if you apply for a visa and you refused, and you know the reasons why you were rejected or refused, and if you're reapplying again, I think you should take stock of some of the reasons why you failed the first time. So if you resubmit exactly the same thing under the same terms and conditions, I think it's likely that you'll be rejected for the second time. We also need an inclusive approach. Probably later on I will discuss about CSOs, religious organizations, and interest groups. The Constitution is broadly a legal document containing the social contract between the state and the people, and it espouses the ideals of all of us, whether you are in Banjul or in Koina. But in the context of where we find ourselves in terms of rebuilding, to have the draft constitution come into existence, the process is largely political, and I think September 2020 is a testament to that. But if you look at ourselves, if you look at where we are in 2024, the socio-political realities and the circumstances, the polarization and the division, also means that political process has to be looked at very carefully in terms of how we arrive at the destination that we aspire. So it is a very important process in terms of the political process, but that is not exclusive. Some speakers have noted this morning political consensus, or in general consensus in the whole process. So building alliances, making sure there is bipartisan support and approach in the process. It's very, very important. What are some of the obstacles that we faced in 2020 and likely to face again? I think the retrospective clause is an issue. Also, there are some provisions that the executive believe that have the potential to undermine or to weaken the president's powers. So now we're confronted with the dilemma of, we live in a democracy where, especially ours, where the supremacy of the sovereignty of Parliament in passing laws and holding government to account. The Vice President and ministers appear before our National Assembly members or committees. So that is important in a democracy for good checks and balances. At the same time, the presidents or the executive feel that some of those provisions have the potential to really minimize presidential powers, and therefore, from their position, the ability of the executive to function machinery of government without unnecessarily being restrained by Parliament. So the traditional role of Parliament and the executive duty and functions of government, of the executive. So how do you reconcile the two? That they mutually coexist while respecting the principles of the separation of powers. So we have to look at some of those provisions, some of the problematic provisions, visit them again, and see what can be done about them. So we have to strike a balance. There are different interests, and they are competing interests and powers. And rightly so in a democracy, each wants to strengthen or maintain its territory. But we have to find a balance that gives due respect to each institution. So we should find a model that is fit for purpose, particularly in terms of our own context and circumstances. But I think the draft is very, very progressive, because we talked about the South African Constitution and even the Kenya Constitution 2010, which are very, very progressive and really inspired our draft constitution. And it was based on significant engagement, both here and in the diaspora as well. And I think the end product, in terms of articulating those ideals, respecting, upholding fundamental rights and freedoms, and several others, all there as well. But at the same time, if we find ourselves at a roadblock, let's look at some of those provisions that we believe are not indispensable, so that we can have a constitution that we want, but that is fit for purpose, and not a constitution that is also watered down to such extent that what we replaced in the 1997 constitution with is not really fit for purpose. But in terms of approach, I think we need a multi-stakeholder approach, like what is happening here right now. We cannot, all the key stakeholders, religious leaders, society, cultural, and others, to play a significant role in this. The Constitution is a national document. It is not exclusively owned by any particular group or institution in society. And therefore, since it is owned by all of us need to be stakeholders. But CSOs probably have the agency because they have the platform and the advocacy expertise, and that has to be utilized. In building consensus that is devoid of partisan politics, and we should also try and avoid looking at this process as a negotiation or as a tussle between political parties, because it is broader than that. It is broader than that. So we have to look at it. And it shouldn't be framed that way, because if it is framed that way, then the end result will be, then it will become a political negotiation between the political interest groups and political parties. But this is for all of us. So we have to avoid looking at it in that lens. But how do we ensure we achieve all of that, especially in this really deeply polarized and divided political environment and society? But again, civil society organizations can play an important role in bridging the gap, so that we look at the end goal, we look at the product, rather than the secondary interest surrounding the product. It is important that we seize the momentum. It is important that there is a certain level of compromise. No constitution is perfect, but I think the draft constitution, in terms of our context, is very good, considering where we're coming from. But at the same time as well, if there's no movement, then it is likely to fail. So there has to be some compromise, there has to be some consensus, so that before 2026, we have a constitution, so that whatever happens in 2027, we know we are beginning on a clean slate, and we shouldn't lose sight of those really important realities. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Council. Thank you for the reminder. And thank you for the thorough examination of the draft constitution and the contentious sort of provisions in there, and your suggestions as the way forward in dealing with them. And from your presentation, I picked up bipartisan. Must be, we have to, the National Assembly members, the politicians, this is should be a bipartisan issue, should be about the Gambia. You said flexible. Indeed, that is also needed, because no one constitution pleases everybody or can please everybody. You also said a holistic approach, and that is very important. Thank you very much for your insights, and to all the panelists here. But I think we have about 10 minutes or so. I wasn't told about questions, but I'm the chair, I shall use my discretion. And a few comments, I just urge that they are short. If there's anybody on the floor that would like to make a comment or have a question for the panelists, feel free. Just put your hand up and we'll give you the floor. I don't know if there's a mic going around. That's another thing. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Dabo. That's another BBC. It's another BBC.
And thank you very much, eminent panelists. You've really given everybody in this room food for thought. Obviously, the issues raised here can engage the discussions of this forum for the next 2 or 3 days. I want to commend and congratulate Gambia Participates for these very commendable efforts they have taken in keeping alive and continuing the conversation that commenced since the passing of the CRC Act. Gambians were engaged in a discussion, in a conversation of what type of constitution we should have, what type of constitution do we want. From then, it nearly disappeared from the public discourse, but thanks to the CSOs and Gambia Participates in particular for really bringing it up and keeping it alive for the good of the country. I want to recognize their efforts in giving us a democratic governance that we deserve. Apart from trying to do so through constitutional reforms, we've seen them in the law courts. Because after all, as I believe Roscoe says that the pronouncement of the judges constitute the law and not what really a National Assembly would do. So they have gone to court here to really vindicate and enforce the provisions of the Constitution of the Gambia, and this is really improving on our democratic culture, on our democratic governance. So I really congratulate you for really being there for the service of this country, in the service of this country. Well, as we continue this conversation, I think one thing that should be clear to every one of us is that the constitution that was presented was not one against any particular individual, and nor was it for any particular individual. Once we believe that this constitution is here to serve everyone, every purpose, and for several years more to come, we'll go to the destination that we really want. When I was coming in, I think I had John Stalin saying that, well, there may be a likelihood that the draft may be rejected as it was before. I don't think we should proceed with that pessimism. I think we should all proceed with the optimism that the constitution that is coming back to the National Assembly will be one approved by the National Assembly. And if otherwise, we'll be preparing the ground for its rejection. Because if in our public discourse we create that notion of pessimism, certainly this will permeate to the National Assembly, and the bill will really be rejected, because in those discourses, the reasons will be given, and those will be some of the reasons that those who want to reject it in National Assembly, they could rely on. So I want to appeal to everybody in our public discourse. Let us do it with optimism, that the constitution that we want will come to the National Assembly, and that the members of the National Assembly will pass it with overwhelming majority. That is what I want to implore everybody to do. Okay, let me just. I was my friend Abdullah Sen, when he was when started saying this, and I just started recalling when we were in Ottawa. Yeah, he was doing research in one of the universities there, and I was at Ottawa U. He mentioned that animal farm that the animal farm, some animals are more equal than others. So it would appear that the knowledge is that Gambians are more equal than others. I hear the excuse by the Honorable Attorney General, with due respect to him, that yes, you need to amend the Constitution so that the diaspora voting can be effective. I told Mr. Tal during the break that I do not think that is right. The constituencies have not been demarcated by the Constitution. The constituencies have been demarcated by the Elections Act. And that Elections Act can be used to demarcate constituencies in diaspora. You don't have to wait, because there's already provision in the Elections Act for diaspora to be registered. So if a question of constituencies, you have a provision in the Constitution that says that these so and so and so in the schedule constitute the constituencies in the Gambia. So you can do so with the Elections Act, so that if the constitutional amendment is the stumbling block for the diaspora voting, you can do so through the amendment of the Elections Act. So, Madam Chairman, and I wish to take permission from you, because I have an engagement in the next 30 minutes.
Just to be fair to him, I was at the Convergence. He said it as an alternative. He said that could be done, whichever goes first. The amendment, if the Constitution gets to get that before, it will take care of it. Otherwise, the amendment in the law will be able to take care of that.
No, the amendment, I believe the amendment that was being discussed is the Constitution amendment, but I'm saying the Elections Act amendment, not the Constitution. Yeah. Can I go? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mike Chabal. Join this thank Gambia Participates for this engagement, and for the panelists for raising all the critical issues. So that my question to all of them really is to how do we move to the next step? What approach we take? Now, personally, just before I answer that question, is to say we have been held hostage by the executive, the parliament, and the political parties. And I think we, the people, have to confront that. I'm happy to see there is the historical perspective in terms of the Constitution, and both Ablai and the two Ablais raised the issue that the Constitution is the people's constitution. So we, the people, should make our constitution. The parliament is not to make a constitution. The executive's job is not to create a constitution. And political parties are not the ones to make a constitution. We, the people, should make a constitution. Now, if you have a draft, they raise all the contentious issues, let it go to a referendum. Now, what approach do we take to get this to a referendum so that we are not, don't hand ourselves over to the institutions to hold us hostage? Now, are we going to send the whole draft to a referendum, or the contentious issues they raise can come out as individual questions in the referendum so that people can vote on those separate questions in addition to the whole of the Constitution? But in any case, it is the people who should decide their Constitution. And 2020, when this matter was put before Parliament, I was one of the people who were saying, don't touch our Constitution. Because as Prof. Sen said, and you raised yourself, how the CRC went the lantern belt of the Gambia and outside the Gambia to consult the opinions of everyone, including meeting the executive separately, meeting the parliament separately, meeting political parties separately. So they had their opinions in the Constitution. So why would we allow second time for that parliament, for those political parties to come and decide again what we all decided through those consultations? So in my view, a process should be made that should just take our draft constitution, whatever draft it is, to send it to the people to decide. But I've followed their conversations, and they raise all the pertinent issues. But I want to throw it back to them to ask them really, this is a good consultation, that we are having, but it will still remain, how do we get this draft to a referendum? What do they think about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Madi. I'll be very brief for that very good question. I do have reservations with the way in which the first panel of drafters was constituted. And I raised some concerns about it. I believe second time around, the drafters must reflect the society and its constituents. I believe it should be inclusive. We should have not only lawyers, I'm sure it was not only lawyers in the first case, but we should have a preponderance of social scientists, women's groups, CSOs, a broad spectrum really of society. Because I do believe that initially, it is important for drafters to make plain their position on constitution and constitution formation or making. They don't come in as a tabula rasa. They don't come in as having no interests or views or positions. And I think it is important that at the first meeting, all panelists make their positions clear. I think inclusivity is important, having social scientists, lawyers, and so forth and so on, or even ordinary persons to basically bring their views into this very messy process.
Suggestion of a referendum?
Yes, thank you, Madi. And I also want to, given the emphasize what Honorable Navar said, that we need to be optimistic in terms of constitutionalism. And for me personally, I keep saying that even if the constitution goes back to the parliament and they reject it, tomorrow I will talk about the constitution again, because that's the way to build a society. It's not just to give up at one point, but also to ensure that you continue. As long as there is life, there needs to be work that needs to continue. And I think Madi asked a very important question in terms of the next steps. For me, the next steps, especially, for me, I basically categorize people. There are decision makers, there are advocates like us that will just, keep repeating what everybody is saying. But there are people that should move the pen. And those that move the pen are those in parliament, those are the political parties. And for me, like Council Fati recommended, there needs to be that continuous engagement, especially through the IPC. For me, I think the IPC must also play a very important role in terms of bringing political parties together, especially when it comes to this constitutional question. But then the second issue is, how many of us understand what is the content of the Constitution? This draft Constitution that we're talking about, this draft Constitution that we want to pass. And I remember doing a survey in 2019 with IRI, and I realized that we asked some of these very pertinent questions. To what extent do issues of women address, most of the answers you'll get is don't know. And sometimes people feel don't know is not a response, but it's a response. Response that people don't know basically what is the content of the Constitution. So outside the small group of educated elites that continue to talk about this issue, how do we involve the everyday Gambian? And I think this is, for me, is also part of the recommendation, especially for this, for Gambia Participate in particular, that we need to also have citizen assemblies going around the communities, talking about the Constitution, helping people to understand the content. Because for me, if that is done, that will also help increase people's level of awareness, but also give them that commitment to be part of that. Imagine now today we're talking about a constitution that is talking about ensuring that before decisions are made on agriculture, farmers get consulted. But this is a constitution that has been rejected. But today farmers are the poorest people. How about if they know that that part of provision is part of that? You think that the farmers will not be happy to be part of that process of developing a new constitution? I think they will be. And so for me, I think these are some of the things that we need to do as part of next step, and more dialogue, more engagement. But the pen must move, and the people that move the pen are the politicians, and they need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fathi?
Madi, I'll respond to the second part. The second part. Ideally, yes, I agree with you entirely, but practically, no, because we have to be alive to the context and the circumstances that we find ourselves. We shouldn't want to find ourselves in a situation where, when we go to referendum not on the content of the document, but referendum on the political parties. And unless there are those changes that have been acquired through consensus, if there are divisions and it sails through parliament, then we'll go to a referendum, but that referendum will be without consensus. And it will be mainly maligned with politics. And we may find ourselves in exactly, although we'd have passed the hurdle from 2020, but fail again. And we don't want to find ourselves in that situation. So I think it is important to reach a compromise that doesn't dilute the integrity of the document. If we can get that, then there has to be some movement in the sense that, if for example, the retrospective clause is a problem, let's find a solution to it. If we believe that there are certain provisions, again, that the executive believes it's a no-no for them, let's find a common ground. Let's find a common ground where they're given the leverage to function, but where Parliament also continues to exercise those accountability powers. Where, when it sails through, we would have achieved consensus, bipartisan support. Then the document would have gone to the public on a bipartisan footing, and therefore it is more likely that you get success. Otherwise, it will go and it will be a referendum. Nobody will care. The whole discussion will be about, you vote for the document, yes, then you're voting for one or two political parties, then you vote for it, you're voting. So we're voting on party lines rather than voting on the document itself, and that's how I say it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fathi. I think we're almost at the end of our time. I just want to reiterate something that, from what Sid said. We need to involve everybody, including every single Gambian who is not literate in English. I mean, it's bad enough for many who are literate but not lawyers to even understand what is in legal documents, let alone those who are not literate. So I think it's absolutely necessary, like we do in some of the legislation. I know it was done in the Women's Act, with the Women's Act. Translate these things. Whether it's oral translation or whatever, or get into the communities. We need to get into the communities and speak to the Gambian people. If we want to tell them that this is their draft constitution and it will be their constitution, I think they have a right to also know what is in there. So, we need to be very inclusive. And I finally want to say that the political will is needed, not just, by word of mouth. We need to see actions. I'm also, like you said, I'm so optimistic. I know Madi once said to me, why are you always optimistic? I said, I have no choice, no other choice. This is our Gambia. We have to be optimistic, about improving where we are. And so I want to believe the president when he says that he is committed to seeing that this constitution is in. I want to believe the Attorney General. He was at the Convergence last week and gave us an update on what his office is doing to get the constitution to the National Assembly, to take it through the process. I want to believe the National Assembly members. I was encouraged by the clerk when he spoke this morning and said that they will do whatever is required when it gets there. And he further said the need to safeguard that constitution when we have it. That's down the line, but that is so important because what happened was we did not safeguard. The last government did not do that. The National Assembly was used for most of these things, if not all of them. So I want to encourage them to do it as soon as possible. We've lost a lot of time already. As I said, I want to encourage them and encourage the National Assembly members when it comes there. I've said this before, it's not about politics. It's not about what you want and what you don't want. It's not a bi-party, it is about the future of this country. And it's really bordering on embarrassing that we still cannot have a new constitution. We're still using the laws that were used to oppress us, laws that had so many problems, are still in force. So I'll bring this session to a close and thank you very much. I hope we have not disappointed. I certainly, on my part, but the eminent panelists have performed splendidly. Thank you all for coming and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.
I hope that was good. Yeah.
I'm sure you can do better. Please give them a... It was Dr. Martin Luther King that said, "This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of our democracy. Gambia, this is our time to make real the promises of our democracy by insisting that we need a new constitution." Now, we are going to have another panel, and this one would have the religious leaders. After that, we will have the panel with the political parties, and then we would close for the day. Now, what we want to do, because we've discovered that from the first panel, some of the questions that are being asked would be more relevant possibly to the one for the political leaders, some for the religious leaders. So what we will do, we will have this panel for around 30, 40 minutes. They will make their suggestions, give their presentations. After that, we will have the final panel with the political parties, and then we will take all the questions, comments, contributions, so that we would have a holistic approach and round up for the day. We want to try as much as possible to leave here around 2 p.m. so that we will go for prayers and lunch. And okay, so now I want to invite no other than Mr. Saliu Tal to moderate this panel. Mr. Tal, please.
Thank you very much, Comrade John Charles Jai. I have very big shoes to wear. My learned friend and senior and sister, older sister, Nene Cham, did a brilliant job. And now I have the honor of following in her footsteps. By the way, Nene and I went to the same university. When we did our undergraduate, and she was always my big sister. She was always the one who ensured that Omar Jawar and I ate good food, and we're very, very grateful to her. So I'm always happy to see her around and to do the great job. We've always been inspired by the likes of Nene and others. Now, this panel is a very interesting panel, and to discuss the various religious perspectives, mainly the Christian and the Muslim perspective. And also, we've got a very prominent, I don't even know how to describe her, but we'll get to that when we get to that stage. Ms. Farijan Senghor is here as well to be one of the panelists to give us a perspective on this very important and burning issue. But it's an issue that is critical to our constitutional building process. I have the pleasure of first inviting, ladies first, women first, obviously. Madam Farijan Senghor, can kindly come to the stage. Give her a round of applause. I would also have the pleasure of inviting Reverend Allen from the Christian Council. Reverend. And finally, I would like to invite Ustaz Omar Bojan from the Supreme Islamic Council. Yes. The Mawid. Yes. I would start by introducing Farijan Senghor is the former executive director for West Africa, handling Article 19 for West Africa for several years. She's a well-known human rights defender, activist, advocate, governance expert for over 20 years and counting. We are very grateful to have Ms. Farijan Senghor in our midst. She's also the founder and executive director of the Center for Women's Rights and Leadership, which is basically fighting to promote women's rights and leadership in Gambia and in the whole continent. Welcome, Ms. Farijan Senghor. We have, to my right, Ustaz Omar Bojan from the Supreme Islamic Council. He's the deputy chair of the media committee of the Supreme Islamic Council. Ustaz, you're welcome. Thank you very much. And we also we are happy to have Reverend Gabriel Allen of the Christian Council, a very active member in this entire process. He's been very involved in all our engagements. We are very happy to have you in our midst, Reverend. You're welcome. Yes. The objective of this panel is basically to hear from the different religions, their perspectives on the draft, on the way forward as far as our constitution is concerned. The point is to hear what the Christians think and feel about the rejected draft constitution and the one we hope to promulgate. Likewise, we'd also like to hear from the Muslim community, represented by Supreme Islamic Council, what they think about the rejected draft constitution and the way forward with the new constitution. Gambia, religion and culture is part of our identity. Nobody can deny that. The two main religions are Islam and Christianity. No Gambian can deny the importance of religion and culture and tradition in the way we live. In the process of writing a constitution, every perspective matters. Majority perspective, minority perspective, all matter equally. And religion is one of those issues. And religion has also been one of the issues that has been contentious, if I can put it mildly. And I think the most contested word was secularism or secular, depending on, and it has been interpreted differently in different corners. I think as a point of departure, we will all agree that I believe we are looking at the rejected draft constitution as the starting point. I'm correct in saying that that's the document we're starting with. We're not going back to draft something new. We're starting that as our base, right? And I think in doing so, we also have to go back to the act, the enabling act, the CRC Act. And specifically look at the section 6.2 sub 5, section 6.2, section 6.2 basically, which basically states the parameters of what our constitution should look like. For example, the Republican system of governance, separation of powers, need to ensure we have national unity, cohesion, and peace, the importance of having elections, and it also goes and says Gambia's continued existence as a secular state, in which all faiths are treated equally and encouraged to foster national cohesion and unity. Based on that mandate, the CRC went out and consulted everybody. In particular, all faiths were consulted extensively and rigorously. All faiths, both Muslims, the Muslims and the Christians, submitted position papers as to what they think should be in the Constitution. And all these position papers, amongst others, were considered. And of course, not every position contained in those papers for every sector or any sector has been accepted, but those accepted were mentioned in the report. And the reasons for those that are not accepted was also contained in the report, saying we accept this position for this reason and we don't accept this position for that reason, because the CRC was given the power to accept positions from a diverse group of Gambians. So it was very, very consultative. And it was a very heated debate, particularly on religion, particularly on the word, what secular means to people from different perspectives. I just want us to always remember that constitutional building is about building consensus so that everybody will see themselves in the Constitution. It's not every aspect of yourself that you can see in the Constitution, but there must be that common ground, that basis, that commonality that makes all of us Gambian. So there's aspects of it that you may want in it, but it may not be, it may also not be reflected, because it may also not be in our collective interest to have it. That is not to say it's not important, but we are imagine trying to accommodate everybody in one document with our diversity. It's not possible to have everything in there. So I think this is what actually informed why some of these provisions, some of these recommendations were not accepted, because we have to have a compromise for the greater good. And in this compromise, we are looking at Gambia first. We are a republic, right? Everybody can practice their religion. Nobody will interfere with that. Nobody will interfere with that. But as a republic, we come together, and these are the laws that guide our republic across all religions. So I think I would just like to quote part of the preamble of the rejected. I don't think there's any controversy about the preamble. I'm right in saying that the preamble was not contested. Am I right in saying that? You can answer me. Did anybody object to the preamble? So we agree that's our preamble. Preamble is like the starting point to our vision. I want to go specifically to a part of the preamble that addresses this issue. It goes, recognizing and appreciating our values as a people of diversity, listen to those words carefully, let it marinate, collectively declare and affirm our duties and responsibilities as citizens of the Gambia, and our love and commitment to each other to foster and promote national unity. I repeat, national unity. Cohesion, I repeat, cohesion, and peace in the spirit and in the name of God the Almighty. I think this is a good starting point. This is the preamble for all of us Gambians. So it's very, very clear. We acknowledge that we are people of God. That's why it's in there, in our Constitution. But we recognize our diversity. We emphasize the need for national unity, cohesion, and peace in everything we do. Before getting into, I don't want to get into too much on the discussion. I will invite Reverend Allen to have the floor for us, to give us the perspective of the Christian community as far as the previous draft is concerned, and as also in terms of what should be in the current bill or draft that will become a bill, so that we make sure that as much as possible, the prospective views of the Christian community is well reflected, and they see themselves in this new, as much as possible in the next constitution we will put before, next bill we'll put before the National Assembly. Thank you very much.
The previous speakers, beginning with Mr. Khalifa Mbai, the perspective he gave from the National Assembly. I was keenly interested in Mr. Marnyang's enthusiasm and what he has been doing. Seeing he's just a small stature, yet what he has achieved. I want to congratulate you immensely. Yeah. I also want to thank Sister Aneta Mahoney for putting us through and identifying the gaps. And it's a good perspective because it enabled myself to notice that I have a small bit in that huge pie. And so it is for most of us here. We all have problems in it. And I don't want us to despair. I want to thank Professor Abdoulaye Sen, that's my great friend. And it's like thinking out of the box and helping us to redirect us. I should not miss moderator, lawyer Nene MC Cham. I know that you are one of the motivators to this constitution, but I must speak to you. Forgive me. I'll be very critical when I'm speaking. Please, it's not personal. It's we are here for the Gambia, and we all want it good. I want to thank Said Mati Jau, eloquent as usual, and Abdoulaye Fati. I'm afraid I'm a reverend minister, and I'm representing the chairman of the Gambia Christian Council. I don't have that liberty to just speak like that. So I will have to read. And some of you, if you want my paper at the end, please, you can ask the authorities to get it, let you have it. And Brother Salutal, we have met earlier, and I know your view, and you know my view, what you need, the public needs to know it. I'm speaking on behalf of the Gambia Christian Council, and it is, I've been sent here by the presiding bishop, the Most Reverend Bani E.F. Manga. He's also the bishop of the Methodist Church of the Gambia. We at church, we take covenants very seriously. The 10 Commandments is 3,500 years old. It is still valid. You don't mess around with it. I am worried in Africa, we abandon our covenants. We don't take seriously what others have done. We think we come alive and we feel we can do it better. We take a different position in that. For me, what we are going through, it reminds me of my dissertation I was doing in 2008. My document went to my supervisor almost 4 times. But what did it do? It refined it. It made it better. And so that is what we are all engaged in. And I want all of us to have an open mind and listen to each other well. The other thing before I tackle the issue is I am not a foreigner. I have lived in this country for the whole of my 70 years, excepting going out for studies and back. And so nobody loves the Gambia better than myself. Every one of us love the Gambia, and I want you to take it from that perspective. Why is my paper? Okay, now let's start this. I first wish to read a passage of scripture that is good for all of us. He said, "You shall appoint judges and officers in all your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, according to your tribes. And they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not pervert justice. You shall not show partiality. And you shall not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of righteousness. Justice, and only justice, you shall follow, and that you may live and inherit the land that the Lord your God is giving you." Deuteronomy chapter 16, 18 to 20. Unlike the general euphoria of the public, which greeted a draft of a constitution for the Second Republic of the Gambia in mid-1996, which became the precursor bill to the final enacted constitution of the Republic of the Gambia in 1997, the release in November 2019 of the Gambia's draft Constitution 2019 by the Constitution Review Commission, CRC, was a disaster. The release of the Gambia's draft Constitution 2019 disrupted social cohesion in various communities and provoked unprecedented acrimonious debate, particularly on the secular Sharia controversy. Since November 2019 to date, the nation state of the Gambia and its diasporan community has not had rest over the secular Sharia controversy and other matters pointed out in other interest groups. As far as the GCC is aware, the secular Sharia controversy has threatened the socio-cultural fabric, the peace and the stability of the Gambia and its peoples in at least 3 levels. First, it undermined love and affection between man and woman in an interfaith family settings. Second, it disrupted good neighborliness in the same street in an ATR, that's African Traditional Religion, Muslim Christian interfaith community. Third, it broke mutual bonds of brotherliness between an extremist and a reasonable person in the Bantabas. As the document was studied, the GCC and its Christian people shuddered at the consequences should the bill pass. It discerned that the Gambia Draft Constitution 2020 was a definite structural force to expand the influence of Islam. It seemed to be a legal instrument crafted to usher in Islamic State through the front door. As I said, I'm speaking from the script, and these are our thoughts about it. These are authentic thoughts. It's not watered down, it's not whatever. So if you are hurt, please forgive. but let us listen. The CRC Act 2017, Section 6, subsection Functions of the Commission, it is reproduced here verbatim. We can see it all. I will just run down to some of the areas that are concerned. C, adhere to national values and ethos. And D, safeguard and promote the following matters. It's the one on the 4 that's our concern: national unity, cohesion, and peace. And the other concern is number 6, the Gambia's continued existence as a secular state, in which all faiths are treated equally and encouraged to foster national cohesion. The GCC is convinced that the drafters of the Gambia Draft Constitution 2020 have erred. They have missed the mark in that they failed to respond satisfactorily to the mandate elaborated in subsection 6.1c, 6.1d1, 6.1d2, 6.1d3, 6.1d4, and 6.1d6. The Gambia's secularity espoused. The Gambia experience is a reputable tourist agency with almost 40 years doing business in the Gambia. It is also a household name. It represents an authentic external observer to the Gambian way of life. On its website, the Gambia Experience states that, and I'm quoting it exactly so that we see how others view us. It states, the Gambia is traditionally very tolerant of all religious creeds and beliefs. And while the country is predominantly Muslim, with up to 90% of the population practicing the basic tenets of Islam, it is essentially a secular country. And it prides itself on its broad-minded acceptance of all faiths. Of the remaining 10%, there is a proportion of Christians and a mixture of localized African traditional religions. A crucial difference to the more strict Islamic countries, however, is that there is no strict adherence to Sharia law. And while most of the population of modern-day Gambia devotedly follow the tenets of Islam and do not eat pork or drink any alcohol, there is, generally speaking, no obvious evidence of religious affiliation, either in dress or in behavior. The Gambia experience has provided an external and independent perspective with regards to prevalent observable national values and ethos in the Gambia. It is a useful article in that we discover a number of factual realities through the lens of others. One, that Gambian peoples are traditionally very tolerant at all religious creeds and beliefs. That despite the normal demographic religious distribution, 90% Muslim, 90% Muslim, 10% non-Muslim, the Gambia is essentially a secular country. The Gambia Experience article observes yet another crucially important and historic fact, that Gambians in general share in the pride of having broad-minded acceptance of all faiths. This article further notes that even the Muslim community, there is no strict adherence of Sharia law. While some may disagree with certain observations made in this article, many cannot but agree that it does portray a fair assessment of the normative values and ethos of observed Gambian life. Despite the catalogue of injustices meted out and documented against the non-Muslim community following the illegal act of President Yahya AJJ Jammeh proclaiming the Gambian Islamic State of December 2015, the authors of the Gambia Draft Constitution 2020 have been insensitive to victims that have failed to emphasize the importance of the illegality of the Islamic State proclamation. The injured non-Muslim community in particular, the Christian community, were in expectation that the drafters will provide some reparation by stating unequivocally that the Gambia is a secular country, in conformity with the traditional values and ethos of the peoples of the Gambia. This never took place. Instead, a lofty but insincere intention was declared in the preamble, stating, recognizing which my chairman of this panel has already read to us. It is a criticism of the GCC that the intention of the preamble of the draft Constitution 2020 has not translated into the contents of the document. The expansion and proliferation and pervading influence of the Sharia courts has nullified appreciation of the peoples of the Gambia as a people of diversity. Despite the failures in the expectations of the Second Republic, the GCC remains more comfortable with the clear-cut and sincere intention statement expressed in the preface of the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia in 1997. Despite what all other speakers have said, I respect this Constitution. It has gone through times of trouble. It has survived it. It is robust, and it has seen us through. It is this Constitution that has permitted us to elect a new president. So we cannot dump it like that. We must review it, look at it. The flaws that are in this Constitution have been inserted and ratified by members of Parliament of the National Assembly. And it is them, and only them, that can clean it and cleanse it. The 1997 Constitution has for us a more attractive preamble. It says, the fundamental rights and freedoms enshrined in this Constitution will ensure for all time respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to ethnic considerations, gender, language, or religion. In acknowledging our fundamental rights, we also affirm our duties and responsibilities as citizens of this country, unquote. The paragraph of the 1997 Constitution unambiguously promises equal treatment of all persons, regardless of ethnicity, gender, language, or religion, to benefit from the same fundamental rights and freedoms. This express intention of the 1997 Constitution is superior to what is available in the draft Constitution 2020. The former is a secular reading which is consistent with the mandate to adhere to the Gambia's traditional national values and ethos, linked with the failure in the intention and content of the Gambia Draft Constitution 2020. Sharia dominance in the judiciary. I'm referring to chapter 8. I'm looking at chapter 8. I'm comparing chapter 8 of the 1997 Constitution and chapter 10 of the new 2020 Constitution. But as a preamble to that, as evidence from the work of the present government through turmoil and normalcy, the prevailing Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia 1997 has proven robust. The established checks and balances between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary arms of government have been found at play. The document testifies that the mechanisms contained therein are efficient when the respective agents rise up to the duties and responsibilities. During the abuse of the 1997 Constitution by the former president, the duties and responsibilities of the officers in charge never disappeared from this constitution. They failed to do their work. They failed to do their work out of cowardice, out of they don't want to lose their jobs, out of many things. But the same accountability is available in there to have checked Yahya Jammeh, to have impeached Yahya Jammeh. It was not done. Under the prevailing Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia 1997, I'm now referring to Chapter 7 of this Constitution. There exist two categories of courts in the judicial system, namely the superior courts and the lower courts. Their respective members have been listed in subsection 120. You can see them there. The superior courts comprise the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the High Court, and the Special Criminal Court. And then in the lower court, we have the Magistrate Court, the Cadi Court, the district tribunals, and such lower courts that the National Assembly would, from time to time, appoint. It is important to point out that among the listed possible members of the lower courts category are found the magistrate courts, the tribunals, and the Cadi Court. Chapter 7 of this 1997 Constitution, which has accommodated and given prominence to the Cadi Court's authority of establishment, composition, decisions, jurisdiction, appellate, persons qualified to sit, representation, and representation functions have all been clearly defined. The Cadi Court is the venue of the judicial system for the selective application of Sharia law, meaning Islamic law in the Gambia. I think this needs to be emphasized. The Cadi Court does not do Sharia full-blooded. It selects, and its selection has been based upon the jurisdiction that has been awarded it. And we see this jurisdiction in 137(4), where it states, the Cadi Court shall only have jurisdiction to apply the Sharia in matters of marriage, divorce, and inheritance. 3 characteristics. Where the parties or other persons interested in Muslims are Muslims. First, the jurisdiction of the Cadi Court is limited to Muslim parties that are interested. This is a very important consideration. Second, the Cadi Court is restrained to deal with only 3 specific family matters, namely marriage, divorce, and inheritance. In villages, towns, and cities throughout the Gambia, the functions of the Cadi Court is known. It has become, for many, part of the Muslim traditional national value and ethos of their community. So Christians do not have problems with the Cadi Court. We have accommodated it. It is part of us. It's part of the national ethos of the Gambia. Making reference again to Chapter 7 of the Judicature of the prevailing Constitution 1997, we note that the composition and functions of the 4 court members were clearly elaborated. That is, in the Supreme Court.
Reference.
Sir.
Sorry, I don't mean to. If you can quickly summarize, if you don't mind.
That is tough. This is a great opportunity.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a great opportunity. We have always been quiet. We cannot speak it out. This is a great opportunity. Please allow me to deliver faithfully what I have been asked to deliver.
Just to bear in mind the time.
Yeah, kindly.
Respect. Thank you.
Okay, I've listed that, okay? Now let me just move, just because you have nudged me, I will respect you, sir. Let me see what I can do. Let me move forward.
To the best of your ability.
Let me see. You see, you are a lawyer. You are disturbing my line. In the opinion of the GCC, the CRC drafters erred in inserting the Sharia court as a replacement to the historical and uniquely crafted Qadi court. This is a major and profound departure from the existing judicial architecture of the Constitution of the Republic of the Constitution of 1997. This radical attempt is considered a direct violation of the mandate 1DC. You know that, and you can check it out. Further, from the Gambia Draft Constitution 2020, Chapter 10, Part 3, Superior Courts, we have seen their composition. It now consists, we see the difference now. Instead of what existed in the 1997 Constitution, we now have a fourth court, a Sharia High Court. We are scared. A Sharia High Court, putting it in the same power with the High Courts. Again, the CRC drafters have imposed a radically new creature, the Sharia High Court, into the category of superior courts in lieu of the existing Qadi panel. The Qadi panel used to be the appellate court whenever the disputes are not whatever. Now we have seen this, so we are not satisfied. So now let's deal with the discussions. I will avoid the discussion on the diverse values and ethos of the nation because that is basically to show that we are all different, diverse, but we are together, and deal with the secular state. A secular state purports to be officially neutral in matters of religion, supporting neither religion or irreligion. I'm quoting this from the website. One of the demands of the CRC Act 2017 is to craft a constitution with a set of fundamental but supreme just laws of the Gambia, which governs and offers equal protection and security to every resident without discrimination, regardless. Consequently, a proposed new constitution ought to meet the mandate to safeguard and promote the Gambia's continued existence as a secular state. In the wake of the release of the Gambia Draft Constitution 2019, there was unprecedented upheaval in the media. The secular Sharia controversy dominated the airwaves. The sustained conflict in homes, street, and bantabas represented empirical evidence that the CRC release of the contents of the document failed to safeguard and promote national unity, cohesion, and peace, and thus violate again the crucial mandate of the CRC Act. Sharia concerns. The proposed Sharia High Court sought to bring appellate jurisdiction to unresolved Sharia matters from the lower courts. These attempts at weaving Sharia law with common law constitute betrayal of trust and gross violations of the mandate of the CRC Act. With regards to the jurisdiction of the Sharia High Court proposed, a leading Gambian Christian lawyer has made a critical comparison between the wordings in the jurisdiction clause of the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia 1997 and this present one that is proposed. It observes that, one, the Qadi court shall only have jurisdiction to apply Sharia in matters of marriage, divorce, and inheritance, where the parties or other persons interested are Muslims. That is 1374. Instead, the new constitution proposed that a Sharia High Court now gives jurisdiction amongst people who are subject to Sharia in that regard. The leading counsel further reasoned that the particular phrase adopted by the drafters stating amongst people who are subject to Sharia in that regard are a very nebulous and dangerous set of words, because the principle of law is that courts guard their jurisdiction jealously, so that the Sharia High Court could insist that they have jurisdiction when a person says they do not. For instance, where one party is no longer a Muslim. I will jump and then share with you some of the views of Leonard. Just before then, some of the things that we vehemently oppose. I think Sister Nene, you're here, if you can just consider our points. That is, GCC vehemently objects to the innovations proposed in the Gambia Draft Constitution 2020 with respect to 1, expansion of jurisdiction of the Cadi Court, 2, substitution of the Cadi Court with a Sharia court, and 3, introduction of Sharia High Court to the category of superior courts. Now I move straight to some of the verbatim concerns. One of the concerns is this. Say, the introduction of a parallel Sharia legal system to run on par with the common law system in itself is an extremely dangerous development. To do so without any constitutional guarantee of a party of esteem in terms of judicial resources allocation exposes a chilling policy position which lays bare what will follow once the draft passes. What is there to restrain future government from starving the common law courts of funds to compel the use of the Sharia courts? You may think this is a pie in the sky question, but it isn't. Under number 2, under this draft constitution, it is Sharia-trained legal practitioners are favored over those of Gambian common law, of those of common law. You can read the rest. I will not. I want to jump to the next one. In essence, the draft constitution is asking for voters to provisionally authorize and entrust into the hands of future government the imposition of Sharia law for all legal matters and to all persons without exception and without any further referendum to authorize such. This isn't my personal opinion, but a point of fact based on the substances of the draft. Finally, a backdoor Islamic state. An Islamic state and a state religion would have been created in all but name once the draft constitution passes and regardless of what anyone says. There exists nothing whatsoever within this draft constitution to prevent weakening of the state by policies informed and driven by religious motivations for the sole objective of strengthening particular religious order within the state. I move to my recommendations. Recommendation 1. This recommendation should tell you that we are all in it together. We are not enemies. We are critical in areas that protects our interests, and in areas where we can work together, we are ready to share. Recommendation 1, that the preamble of the proposed new constitution shall always include the preamble statement of the existing constitution in order to maintain institutional memory. I want to respect, as I mentioned to you earlier, we respect covenants. I want us to respect those. We want you to respect those that did work before. 2, that the new preamble shall give adequate consideration to integrating paragraphs 4 and 5 of the existing preamble into the new constitution proposed. 3, that the first clause of the new constitution shall be, I beg your support in this. I beg your support. Imam, I beg your support in this, and everybody else. That the first clause of the new constitution shall be, the Gambia is a sovereign secular republic. 4, that the Cadi court system of the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia 1997 be retained without amendment in the proposed new constitution. That the Sharia court of the proposed draft constitution 2020 be replaced with existing Cadi court system. That the Sharia High Court of the proposed Gambia draft, the proposed draft constitution be removed completely from the superior courts category. I want to end by saying, let us do it together. It's, as someone, I think Professor Nyang said it, it's a messy business, trying to get the consensus of everyone. It's a messy business. But it was God's intention. It is not by accident. In that parliament on that day, National Assembly on that day, there was not a single Christian voice. So you cannot say we were there, we are putting it. It is God's purpose that it was not properly done. And as I said earlier, it's like a dissertation. We have time to do it better. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Reverend, for your candid, sincere, and perspective from the Christian community. I would like to reiterate that I sit here as a moderator. I do not have a position where I sit. No, I think it's very important because I have to be fair to all parties on the panel. No, because of my position is, every view matters. There's nothing like a minority view. Every view matters. That's why I gave you more time to be able to explain your position, and we respect your position. We respect the candor you deliver your position and the passion, and I think it's cause for thought and reflection and introspection for everyone. So on that note, I will actually invite Ustaz Omar to give us the perspective from the Supreme Islamic Council. Thank you very much.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walahum bi ihsanin din. I humbly greet all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this program and all those who are taking part here as a national duty to craft a constitution that we want as a country. As far as the Supreme Islamic Council is concerned, we are key stakeholders in this constitutional development, which is premised on the historical evolution of Islam. Islam has a very rich history in terms of constitutional development. 1,400 years ago, when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina and established an Islamic state in a multi-faith society, and inclusively they crafted a charter called Sahifatul Medina to ensure people with different faiths, with different background, diverse background, to live on the same geographical space in peace and harmony and development. So constitutional development is not a new thing in the Islamic literature, and we must understand that. Now coming to the Gambia has gone through different levels of history, from pre-colonial, colonial, and where we are right now. And there are a lot of things that we can talk as far as Islam is concerned. Now, when this process started, as any other stakeholder, the council is always keen to engage and to also give its opinions on matters relating to the constitution, especially matters related to Islam. We, after consultation, we prepared our position paper and submitted it to the CRC. And when the draft was out, the first draft, we also reacted accordingly. And if you look at our position paper, I believe it's one of the most precise and concise, very short position paper that we submitted. That does not necessarily mean we do not have reservations and problems within the Constitution. Islam is a complete way of life. It has a full-fledged legal system. We know that. And most of those things have been infringed, or they are not been adhered to in this country based of our evolution from colonialism and where we are today. Now, being cognizant that it is an inclusive document, a multi-faith society, we cannot have all what we want. Then we just curtail and be very precise on points that we believe are very detrimental to the core values of Islam. And when we are doing so also, we were cognizant of the rights of other people. And that is why in our position papers, we do not name anybody. We just go straight to the point. This is our opinion, and this is how we think issues should go. So we are very strategic in what we do, knowing the influence that the council has in this country. We're talking about the passing of the Constitution to the National Assembly. There's a bigger trouble on the ground, and that is the referendum. And you know the extent of our platform, our influence. I do not need to elaborate more on that. That is why we are very careful. In order to accommodate others, we also give away, because constitution of this nature is bargaining. You take some and you leave. So we just look at issues that we think they are threat to our the common values of Islam. And we say definitely we are suggesting that you do X or this or that and do not touch this and that. That was our position. And among those one is the stubborn secular discussion. Secularism has been interpreted differently. You know, intellectuals, they have that capacity to interpret words, documents that they do not coin, but to their own interest. So we also have our rights to interpret it the way we understand it. And by looking at the history of secular, you will all agree with me that secular is not friendly to religious values. That is the fact. Maybe evolution somewhere, but the word secular, the history, and the reality is never friendly to Islam, so religious values at large. So therefore, the position of the Supreme Islamic Council remains the same, that the status of the Gambia to remain as it is the draft, that the sovereign republic, no inclusion of secularism, because we believe it's a threat to our values, not only as Muslims but as religious people, and we still stand by that. And we do not intend to suppress anybody or to marginalize anyone, be it majority or minority. It is not our intention, but our intention to ensure that in future our religious values are already on a big threat. We know that. So for us, we believe we can live together in harmony and in respect without the inclusion of secular. We have been living here so many years, so many decades without even the word. I believe many people start knowing the word secular. It was during the constitutional, brouhaha. But at the end of the day, this is our belief, and we believe, it is a no-go area for the council, and we still stand by that. But we also want a constitution that will guarantee the rights of the other people. The other issue is about the issue of Sharia, because that definitely is talk about Islam. Definitely, I think it is very clear. Sharia here is applicable to only the laws. So we do not think, and we are yet to be convinced that this is detrimental to other people that are not subjected on this Sharia. The changing of the nomenclature from Qadi to Sharia. We have political science, we have intellectuals here. This is matter of linguistics. If you understand Arabic, if you go to our schools, you tell them Qadi court in Arabic language, they will laugh at you. Because basic Arabic does not even allow that. The nomenclature was wrong. From the colonial ordinances was Mohammedan code, because they thought Islam was for Muhammad, and Islam is not for Muhammad. He was the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So changing the nomenclature, I think, is a matter of trying to bring the right a name given to the court, because the court does its judgments based on Sharia law. So calling it Sharia court, we do not see any problem in that, because that is the right nomenclature as far as language and as far as Islamic jurisprudence is concerned. The expansion, we welcome it, because I don't know how accurate that is, but someone told me many people prefer to go to Catholic courts than the conventional courts. So if you have that pressure on them, definitely to expand their jurisprudence, their jurisdiction, without infringing upon the rights of other faiths, definitely we have no problem with that as well. So basically, these are a few points that the council. We also have a reservation. As I said, not everything in the draft we accept it, but we have reservation. We have a strategy to take some and leave some for others. If you want to sit and look at the Constitution, compare it with the Sharia